This will have absolutely nothing to do with the coronavirus epidemic. This is going to be about Frank Zappa. When I went away to college, my parents drove me to the school, found my dorm, dropped off my luggage, and left me standing there on the sidewalk. On my way into the dorm, I could see, above the door, there was a small roof. Behind it, a window that was wide open. The occupant of that room, an upperclassman, had placed 2 speakers outside on the roof and turned them up as high as they would go. And they were blasting "Freak Out" by Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. The upperclassman was telling me that this was important, something I needed to know. I guess what I remember from it is the voice saying, "Susie, Susie cream cheese." I familiarized myself with the double album, and I saw the next productions. I didn't listen to them, but I smiled at the names, and I did not reconnect with Frank Zappa until a few years later when he came out with Hot Rats, and I really did like that a lot. He did too. I've seen some interviews with Frank, and in one of them he mentioned a book he wrote. That's crazy because he hated to read, but he wrote it because other books about him were piling up and he thought they had nothing to do with him. False stories and false representations. So I got Frank's book, and I read it. Frank said he was nothing special as a kid, but that's not quite true. He liked what he liked, and that is rare. It made him calmly unconventional. He was naturally weird, especially in his tastes in music. He liked rhythm and blues, Stravinsky, and Webern. He'd play something he liked for his mom or a friend, and they would look at him like, "You have to be out of your freaking mind." Because he was constantly trying to make art, a movie, and the music, he got into an amazing amount of trouble with the law. When he finally broke through with Freak Out, he knew that his many admirers were convinced that he had to be up to his eyeballs in chemical refreshment, but it wasn't true. He smoked pot a few times, but it made him tired, and Frank liked to work. Record labels were all about budgets, schedules, and product, also creating creative accounting practices and fraud. So Frank got his own studio and a host of new headaches. In 1968, he saw Duke Ellington backstage begging an assistant producer for a $10 advance, and he broke up his band. Enough of that. And he kept doing what he wanted to do. He said he was practicing both political theater in his music and in his life, amateur anthropology. For instance, during a visit to Orchestra Land, I looked at these folks and the instruments they had chosen to play, and tried to imagine what strange forces had produced those choices. By the way, his orchestral works produced big promises, large expenses, and no music. Frank was both a very humorous and a very serious person. He was serious about his humor. I'd hear a hint of something he wrote, often a mistake, and I would pursue it to its most absurd extreme. He called it putting the eyebrows on it. His music was a combination of attitude and eyebrows. Music for Frank was architecture, building with sound. He was almost always at odds with the people he was working with. Musicians played not for music, but for the blowjobs after the show. Corporations wanted not new music, but the big hit. And the unions wanted extra pay for doing nothing, or no one plays anything at all. Frank was attracted to music of an unusual experimental nature. Citing Spike Jones as a source, he said he liked sounds that were funny in themselves. On stage, he favored what he called structured, spontaneous entertainment. Of his works, he said, some of them are truly stupid, some of them are slightly less stupid, and a few of them are sort of funny. On tour, he might play a total of 960 solos. Of them, by his measure, maybe 20 were worthwhile. That's about 2%. Because he was a musician, and I'm not, Frank wrote stuff I really did not understand, like the creation and destruction of harmonics and statistical tensions essential to the maintenance of compositional drama. Or he'd go on about digital recording techniques. Late in his much too short life, he got into it with religion, politics, the IRS, censors, and kooks on TV, especially the televangelists. None of them were worthy opponents. He should have known they would only piss him off and confirm his worst suspicions. He should have spent more time at his synclavier. I like Frank because he was an explorer and he was sensible. Deviation from the norm means you must know the norm, he said. Satire, for Frank, was a fair and honest representation of whatever was going on at any particular time and place by any particular person. It was not a fabrication. It was more of a snapshot documentary that emerged as satire with the eyebrows. Frank called his art Dada, then pushed that to absurd extreme. And he faced tough questions like, why do you necessarily have to be wrong just because a few million people think you are? And is it really worth the trouble to write a new piece of music for audiences that don't care? Constantly opposed, Frank never stopped trying to express himself. The first time I heard him, he certainly stunned me.